to the program, Littleton and the Civil War. Pardon me while I keep on bumping into the rifle in back of me. I chose this topic because Civil War is one of my favorite time periods, and it was one of my favorite time periods to teach in school. So I thought that I would do something that would bring Littleton more into history. A lot of people, I know a lot of people are surprised that when some of the history is mentioned about how Littleton was involved in the world and the rest of the United States. I mean, we think of this town as just a small blot on a map, but it's not. It has a great history. So we're going to do the Civil War, and I'm standing in the Civil War display, or part of the military display. It isn't dedicated totally to the Civil War. Now, one of the first things, in doing my research yesterday, one of the first things I came across was in the Centennial book. This book was published in 1884. Littleton was founded and established in 1784. So this was to celebrate the 100th anniversary of Littleton. So I went through and I read a speech that was given. The address was given by Captain George Farr. Now, some of you may remember a place called Far Hill in Littleton. And yes, he's one of the Farrs of Far Hill. So anyway, I thought, I'm going to read the speech. It's short, has a lot of great history in it. It's really cool. Now, something about this, the title is called Littleton and the War of the Rebellion, addressed by Captain George Farr. Now, there was a president. This wasn't the president of the United States in 1884 who presided. He was the president from Littleton. He was presiding over the whole event, the Centennial. So it says, the president said, the next and last subject on the program is Littleton and the War of Rebellion. We have to respond to it, a person whose service in that terrible conflict is so well known that it requires no introduction from me. You are acquainted with him. We all know him, Captain George Farr. And then parentheses, the word cheers. Huzzah! Address. Mr. President and fellow citizens, I am not exactly in the condition to some of the previous speakers have been, who have prepared lengthy remarks to the delivered on this occasion, and, the time being so fully occupied, could not present them. Knowing full well that before it would reach me, you would be completely tired out, and I did not prepare remarks at any length. You undoubtedly are extremely tired. You have sat here for hours in this hot and smoky air, and have shown much patience. I think it would have been proper if there had been someone to respond in behalf of the soldiers of the Revolution and the War of 1812 and the Mexican War. And yet, as you have heard from the orator of the day and other speakers, this town was not settled until just about the time of the Revolutionary War, and consequently, there was hardly anyone here who would go to that war. In the War of 1812, there were few that had an interest, and few that went. Consequently, Littleton took but little part in the wars of the country until the last great and terrible War of the Rebellion. In that war, let me say to you, that she was not behind any of the sister towns of the state, and she was ahead of the large part of them. As soon as the first call in April 1861 was issued, the young men of Littleton, some at home and some abroad, rushed to arms. They laid aside their civilian dress. They donned the blue, either of the Navy or the Army, and they went forth to battle for their country's rights. When the call was issued, it was only for 3 months' men. And when the delegation from this town reached their rendezvous in Portsmouth, they found the 1st Regiment of 3 months' men full, and learned that if they went at all, they must go into the 2nd. They did not believe in going down there and then turning around and coming back. And the result was that nearly all the men that started for the 3 months campaign put their names on the rolls and went forth, as the boys used to say, for 3 years, unless sooner killed. 12 went from this town in the 2nd Regiment, a regiment that probably saw as much fighting as any during the war. And there was not a regiment that went from the state of New Hampshire that ever in any respect disgraced its colors or the state from which it came. The larger part of those who went in the 2nd Regiment served their full 3 years. A part of them then re-enlisted and served until the war was over. 8 men went into the 3rd, 1 in the 4th, 14 in the 5th. The 6th Regiment took the largest number of any up to that time, 27 responding to the call. The 7th took 13, the 8th 9 men. These regiments were went all in 1861 and in the winter of 1861-1862. When the call came in 1862 for more men, the 9th Regiment was raised. 23 men responded in the fall of 1862 and went into the 9th Regiment. During this exciting period, when they were holding war meetings all over the state, they had several in this town, at one of which, called at Roncesvalles Hall, there were so many people present that all could not get in, and the meeting was adjourned to the Congregational Church. This town did not furnish any men for the 10th, 11th, or 12th regiments, but a company was raised here for the 13th Regiment. 51 enlisted from this town, 3 in the 14th, 6 in the 15th, 2 in the 17th, 2 in the sharpshooters, and 56 in other organizations. In 1863, there were some men drafted, and I'm unable to find that any drafted men went from this town. There were but very few, and with them, as the saying was when they were drafted, in either the blue or the green, either the uniform or the greenback. Interesting. Those that were drafted preferred to furnish the green rather than to don the blue. I found on looking over the Adjutant General's report that the town furnished 29 more men than the quota. There were but 2 other towns and 2 wards in the state of Concord that furnished a larger number beyond their quota than did the town of Littleton. No other town in Coos or Grafton County furnished a larger number in proportion to its inhabitants. In 1860, less than 300 men were reported for military duty in the town of Littleton, yet 227 men, during the 4 years of the war, responded to their country's call and did valiant service in the field. Still, the soldier is not entitled to all the honor in fighting the battles for his country. This is as much and more due the fathers and mothers, wives and sisters, who sent their sons, husbands, and brothers to fight for the preservation of this glorious union. For mental suffering is said to be worse than physical suffering, and while those in active service were not free from mental suffering, those at home suffered continually, knowing full well that any mail might bring them tidings of a great battle, and some loved one left dead or wounded on the battlefield. But at last, on the banks of the Appomattox, the Army of Northern Virginia lays down its arms, and the great rebellion is crushed. Nowhere in the world's history can there be found an instance of so large a number of men being so quickly disbanded and scattered throughout the length and breadth of the land, and taking up the implements of peace. They have literally turned their swords into plowshares and gone forth, working for the prosperity of the country they have labored so hard to save. And never has the United States made such progress in the arts and sciences, in manufactures and wealth, as it has for the last 19 years since the close of the rebellion. Most of that great army of the North are getting on with the shady side of 50 and are constantly dropping away. And I bespeak for them the same kindly feeling you have always shown. And I hope and trust that none of them will ever disgrace the name and record of a Union soldier. To continue, the President said, I would go one thing further, and that is that upon the adjournment of the exercises of this stand, there are athletic sports to the place upon the adjoining field. Also in the evening there will be fireworks in and about this grove and plain. We will now listen to this Saranac band. So that brought the centennial celebration, the speeches, to an end. And as you found that George Farr was the last to speak, and he kept it fairly short. Okay. Now something about George Farr. You're familiar, as I said, with Farr Hill. Well, there was a hotel on top of Oak Hill, and it was called the Oak Hill House. That burnt to the ground in 1895. As a matter of fact, it was the same year and the same month that George Farr passed away. Actually, it was 3 weeks after George passed away of a fatal heart attack. But so I figured that was probably one of the most important things to actually hear the words written by someone who fought in the Civil War. All right, and I keep hitting my head on the rifle. You can see it swinging. Now, what I want to do is let's look at some of the artifacts that we have here. Now, in the case, and I will bring some of these out without doing little damage, hopefully, and I may end up doing this. There we go. In the case, we have here a bullet maker, and the soldiers would pour their melted lead into the hole. They would move this, that would cut the lead off. They would let it cool. They would open, and the bullet would fall out. So this was a bullet maker from the Civil War. Also, we have here, we have here some mini balls, some bullets from the Civil War. Okay? Now, we think of them as mini, M-I-N-I. No, they're actually Minet. They were invented by a Frenchman named Minet. All right? And you notice that they are pointed. These are extremely deadly. They were pointed, and the back, can you see that? Well, Glenn, a bit. The back is hollowed. So when the rifle was fired, there'd be more force behind this. And it is also, can you see that, Glenn? The rings on it? Okay. It's ringed. Because within this, it's a rifle. It's not a musket. A musket is smooth bore. The bore of this rifle is rifled. It's spiraled. So what would happen is this would start turning. And with the point coming out using physics, it was deadly accurate. All right? So this is a Minet ball. All right? Now, also, we have here a collection of percussion caps, and these are just really tiny, so we're not going to. These are percussion caps. They would fit on a part up here. This here is called a nipple. It would fit on that. When the hammer came down and struck it, it would cause a spark that would ignite the, which would ignite the powder, which would cause the explosion and would push the ball out. All right. Now, I want to speak just a little bit about this in back of me. I will move out of the way a little bit, but as you can see, this is a Civil War rifle, all right? And it comes complete with the bayonet, which is in three, it has three, it's three-sided. It's not straight like a knife. And the reason for having the bayonet three-sided was that it made it virtually impossible to sew up the wound, because this was probably the most savage war that ever happened. What was happening, and I've told people when they come in here, that the Civil War was, they were using 18th century tactics, using 19th century technology. So that would be well, how can I explain that? That would be if we went up in a battle with a group that had laser guns and we were using our automatic weapons. So that's why so many, I mean, it was between 500 and 700,000 were either wounded or killed during this or missing in action. So that takes in both sides, but they were all Americans, all right? So, and you can see the length of this, okay? So it's about, there we go, from the tip of my fingers to where my hand is, all right? So, so we do have the original. Now, a friend of mine let us borrow this. This is a boot pistol, all right? And one shot, and it would fit down inside the boot. Now, something I wanted to mention about this, remember this wasn't an automatic weapon. And a soldier was expected to load and fire that accurately 4 times in a minute. That means load, aim, fire in 20 seconds. And every shot had a count. 20 seconds. Just an absolutely incomprehensible thing to wrap your head around. All right? Now, I want to bring this up a bit. This is called a mucket. Got a good shot of that, Glenn? Mm-hmm. Today we have in the military our canteen cups. We have our mess kits. I remember, well, I haven't been in the military for years, but we had those wonderful mess kits. This was a mess kit. And if you notice, there's holes in the side. Okay? So there would be a string. And the soldier would boil water in this. They would cook their food in this. They would drink their coffee out of this. And how they made coffee is they boiled water and they put coffee grounds in. And yuck. That's about all that I can say. Now, it's rather neat because, I mean, this does go back. This is, what, about 157 years old for this mucket. And this mucket, we do have a provenance inside. It says, Army coffee mug and belt buckle. Well, I have the coffee mug, the belt buckle. There's the belt buckle. All right. And it belonged to Frank T. Moffat, Dr. Moffat. Now, I did some research yesterday. And Dr. Moffat, when he went in, was not a doctor. He was a sergeant. He was in the infantry. He was only 22 years old, so he did not attend medical school. And remember, medical school back then was nowhere near what medical school is now. I mean, you went for a year and you were a doctor, and you attended, person attended lectures. But inside, it says Dr. Moffat's grandfather, James Moffat, settled on a farm just above the old Waterford Toll Bridge. Now, you're familiar with the bridge is that connects New Hampshire with the Vermont. Okay, well, there was a toll bridge just below that. And his grandfather settled there in 1815. All right. Now, Dr. Moffat became a doctor in 1870 and practiced from 1870 to 1896 when he passed away. So he was a young man. He was only in his 50s when he passed away. And it says he lived in the old George Little house. This is interesting. How many of you know where companion pet care is? Okay. That was the L of the George Little house. So before the house was torn down, the L was removed and moved to that spot. So that was actually part of a house. And that's where Dr. Moffat had lived, but not on that location. If I remember correctly, the Little house was on Clay Street. So it was moved in back of the banks, where the banks are, in the back of Profitos, and right on through to its present location. So this belonged to Dr. Moffat. All right. Now, down in the bottom, if you can get this, Glenn, we do have Civil War swords. I'm not going to take them out because I'm just not They are difficult. We have the thing pretty well laid out, but we do have Civil War swords, swords from the Civil War down at the bottom. We have, and I showed you the, oh, over here, this is really a very neat thing. Over here is a Civil War ammo pouch, and it's in absolutely incredible condition, thanks to one of our volunteers, Joan Noyes, who, and Joan is watching this program, she does a lot of work to keep our leather products really supple and from drying up and cracking. I mean, so she'll saddle soak these and condition them, and so this does go back to, this is about 157 years old. All right. And I'm using 157 because, I mean, the Civil War was 1861 to 1865. So I don't have the, you know, it could be 159 years old. All right, but so we have that. We have antique powder horns, but they were used, they were a different time period. What had happened to make things a little bit easier to fight is they would have the powder was pre-measured, so they didn't use the powder horn. They were put in a paper, and they would grab the envelope with their teeth, rip it, pour the powder in.
Carried in the.
And, pardon?
It was carried in the.
And it was
bag.
carried in that, you know, so they kept their bullets in there, and they kept their powder in there. So let's see. We did the boot pistol, the rifle, the bayonet. Cool. I'm going to take my timer, and we're going around over here. There is a very interesting book that I want to show you. Okay, what Glenn has now is, you have this pretty well focused, my friend?
Mm-hmm.
All right. These are the handwritten records of all the boys who went into the Civil War. And this one here, Cyrus Eastman Burnham. All right, his date of birth, place of birth. He was born the 26th of December, 1838, in Littleton. Father's name, mother's name. Whoop, my arm's in the way. Father's name, mother's name. All right. Then we have date of first enlistment, date of second enlistment. Moving this way, occupation, where he lived, date of enlistment right here, where credit was given. When someone from Littleton enlisted, credit was given to the town of Littleton. All right. If someone from Bethlehem came to Littleton and enlisted, Littleton received the credit, not Bethlehem. Okay. So it was the place of registration. All right. Now we'll continue back to this. All right. I'm going to move over this way because reading it upside down. Okay. Troop or battalion, regiment, state. Now if you go, I'm going to move down this way.
What regiment was that?
The 17th. 17th. I read about that in a speech. All right. For what service? He was a musician. Band. Okay, so Cyrus Eastman Burnham was a musician. Okay. Now you follow along, and it says it's hard to read some of this. Here we go. When returned October 9th, 1863. And one thing in the speech that I read to you, you can keep that focused here. In the speech that I read to you, it talked about the 3-month men. Because it was thought that the Civil War was going to be over in 90 days. It was going to be quick. It was only a quick rebellion. So that's why President Lincoln called up soldiers for 90 days. Okay, and as we all know, it went on for 4 years. All right. Now, if he was taken prisoner, if he was wounded, and we do have people, I can go through here. Okay, we have his discharge, where he was discharged. I can move. I'm trying to find. I should have. We do have some who were taken prisoner. There were some who died in Libby prison. Some who see. And one thing I wanted to show. I'm going to be very careful moving this because this is very old. All right. One thing I want to show is up here in the corner. You can see it says it's stamped 7th Regiment. This is broken up. So if you know if you have a relative and you know their regiment, you know their name, we can look up and find their regiment and go right straight to their paperwork. Okay? It's a shorter form of the soldiers' records. Okay? Discharged, here we have Andrew Briggs, okay, birthplace, Denmark. All right, so we have this, and it is an incredible book. Now, to finish up, I'd like to move over this way, and Glenn will follow over. This is very interesting. This is a uniform. And I've had people look at this and comment, it's really small. They would fit little boys. Well, something I would like to tell the audience is that people back in this time period, they were small. The average height and weight for a Civil War soldier was about 5 feet 4 inches, and the weight was about 135, 140 pounds. All right, and you have to remember they were pretty lean. That was a lean 140 pounds, because a lot of the boys from up here, they worked on the farm. Now, you do manual labor on the farm, and a lot of calories are burned. This is a Civil War band uniform. So, and we had to put it, I did not have a mannequin that it would fit. Tried to get a male mannequin for it, and it just didn't fit. So currently, until we do find something, it's on a very small female mannequin, in order to be able to display it. Now, this could have been the type of uniform, because it's band, that Cyrus Burns had worn. Right on down, it has the tails, all the original buttons, the brass buttons on it, and this could have been a uniform very similar that Cyrus would have worn. And as you can see in our corner, we have this. As I said, this is our military display. So I have a feeling we might be running pretty well on to the half-hour time. And yes, we are. So I'd like to thank you for coming and tuning in to us and constantly, oh my gosh, there's one thing I can't go away yet. Thank you, Glenn just pointed, it's on the list. Oh goodness, I have a lot of stuff on this. This here, this wooden box belonged to James Merrill. That was his suitcase. He brought that to the Civil War. It's just empty. It's just a wooden box. His earthly belongings were in that and followed him around. And this was given to us by Winston Merrill a number of years ago. And Win Merrill's grandson is named James. So James, my former student, does carry on the name of his great-great-great-grandfather. I believe I have it. So I think we might, oh, wait, another thing. Gosh almighty. This here. It's a fork from the Civil War, from a mess kit. Okay, so just, I'm gonna stop this, I'm gonna keep on finding things. Well, no, here's another one. They didn't have flashlights in the Civil War, so it is a little oil lamp that they would use for light at night. Now I'm going to bring this to an end. All right. So once again, thank you so very much for tuning in. Hope you enjoyed the program. On Saturday, we will do another program on Littleton's history with the Civil War. It'll be more along the line of a PowerPoint presentation, and it will give you some of the names and what happened to some of the people and how the town reacted to the Civil War when the first shots were fired in April 1861. So thank you for tuning in. Don't forget, like us on Instagram, and like us on anything else you can like us on, and let the world know that we're doing this, and share this with the world. Thank you for tuning in. Bye bye, and have a great day.